Hello and welcome to this video on research done right using the example of a gluten sensitivity researcher. As has been established in an earlier video, academics put themselves out there by publishing. This leaves them vulnerable when it comes to criticism. In this case, the worst critic of one researcher was their own sense of perfectionism. An article by Bersisky and Company published in 2013 found gluten sensitivity to be a real thing. But something struck them about the research design. It was sound that used a small sample, and they thought that they should look into this further. This was also supported by an incongruity between the results and real-world data. 1% of people have celiac disease, but up to 20% claim a reaction to gluten without immunological involvement. This has been titled gluten sensitivity. They decided to review the experiment in a more sound way, that removed more variables and possible issues. Though the title gives away the ending, the details are important. Through this research, a number of things came about. One of them is the term FODMAP. This refers to a thing called fermentable oligo-di-mono-saccharides and polyols. They are a collection of products that cannot be properly consumed by some people in foodstuffs and are generally related, not the same, as gluten. The method for the latter study was as follows. Originally, a large number of people were enrolled, and by the end, 37 participants remained. They were aged between 24 and 61. 6 of those were men, and 31 were female. They claimed to be gluten sensitive, but did not have celiac disease. They were randomly assigned to groups, and they were given a clearing diet. This diet had a reduced amount of FODMAPs in it, and then they were placed on either a high or low gluten diet to figure out whether or not they were sensitive to gluten. This was for a 2-week period, then there was 2 weeks for washout, and then 2 weeks for the participation, and then a small subset was swapped over in their diets. Their symptoms were then evaluated. The key to this whole trial was the initial run-in period. This had low to no FODMAP presence. The participants felt better during this time than they did during the periods of low or high gluten. As should be obvious, this was not what should happen if gluten is the cause of the problems. More than that, when they validated the trial by a repeat over a shorter period, different people responded in a negative way than during the first stage. Presumably the gluten intolerance only affects them some of the time. The trial was designed in such a way that it needed a high threshold for significance given the small number of participants. But even with more generous margins, it would fail to find a statistically relevant result. Both gluten and whey had no correlation or statistical value in predicting the participants' response. The key thing coming out of all of this has been that going on a gluten-free diet results in the selection of lower FODMAP food, and the improvement is likely due to the reduced amount of FODMAP, and this is also largely attributed to fructan. The conclusion of this study was almost to the point of claiming gluten sensitivity does not exist. Specifically, this quote, "In a placebo-controlled crossover rechallenge study, we found no evidence of specific or dose-dependent effects of gluten in patients with non-celiac gluten sensitivity placed diets low in FODMAPs." The fact that a researcher felt there was an inconsistent or unaccounted for variable in their research design, and then went back to correct it, is an admirable and desirable outcome in research, an example of praiseworthy practice, despite the fact that it would have an adverse effect on their previous work. Thank you for watching this video. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you may have below.